Hello, wonderful person. This is Chris for the Informed Stoner, and it's Tuesday afternoon and time for our afternoon news update. Today's news update comes from NBCnews.com. Mexico president lashed out after thousands protest in pro-democracy rallies. At the root of the conflict are plans for Lopez Obrador, approved last week by Mexico's Senate, to cut election funding, including training to oversee polling stations. Yeah, that doesn't sound good. Pro-democracy everywhere in Mexico. I hope they're not trying to pull a fast one on you guys. Mexico's president lashed out Monday at demonstrators who protest cuts to election funding over the weekend, belittling their concerns about threats to democracy and dashing any hopes that he would try to ease rising political tensions. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, I'm butchering Obrador, I'm sure. I apologize. Seemed to revel in the conflict, hurling insults at tens of thousands of people who demonstrated in Mexico City's main plaza, calling them thieves and allies of drug traffickers. They're trying to pull a fast one over the democracy chain. I don't know. We'll have to see what's going on. There was an increase in the number of pickpockets stealing wallets here in Zocalo. But what do you want? So many white-collar criminals in one place, Lopez Obrador said his daily morning press briefing. Wow, this guy sounds like a tool. I don't know a whole lot about him, but doesn't sound like a great guy so far. At the root of the conflict are plans by Lopez Obrador, which were approved last week by Mexico's Senate, to cut salaries and funding for local election offices and scale back training for citizens who operate and oversee polling stations. The changes would also reduce sanctions for candidates who fail to report campaign spending. Reduce sanctions. That's getting fishy. Lopez Obrador denies the reforms are a threat to democracy and say criticism is elitists. Okay. Can't criticize them or you're an elitist. That sounds very fishy. He argues that the funds should be redirected to helping the poor. Well, okay, helping the poor is good if that's what's actually going on, but it still sounds very fishy. Riffing on the protesters' slogan, "Don't touch the INE National Electoral Institute," Lopez Obrador, and the slogans were "Don't touch corruption, don't touch privileges, don't touch the narco government." They don't care about democracy. What they want is to continue with the oligarchy, the rule of the rich, the president said. Demonstrators say the electoral law changes approved last week threaten democracy and can mark a return to the past practices of vote manipulation. That's a slippery, scary slope. I hope that's not true. And like I said, people in Mexico, I hope the best for you right now because elections can get very divisive. Few at Sunday's demonstration had any kind words for Lopez Obrador either. The path he's taking is toward socialism, communism, said Fernando Gutierrez, 55, a small businessman. It's obvious from the aid going to Cuba. Cuba. They're sending aid to Cuba. That's interesting. I did not know that. Gutierrez said Lopez Obrador has imported coronavirus vaccines, medical workers, stone rail ballasts from Cuba, but has shown little taste for socialist policies at home. Sunday's demonstrators were clad mostly in white and pink, the color of the National Electoral Institute, and shouted slogans like "Don't touch my vote." Well, that's fair. I mean, leave their votes alone. Like a similar but somewhat larger protest on November 13th, the demonstrators appeared somewhat more affluent than those of the average demonstration. Okay, so are they trying to say that, like, it's the rich people in Mexico that are mad? I don't quite know. The heated nature of the debate drew attention from the U.S. government. Today in Mexico, we see a great debate of electoral reforms that are testing the independence of electoral and judicial institutions. Brian A. Nicholas, a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, wrote in his Twitter account, "The United States support independent, well-resourced electoral institutions that strengthen the democratic process and the rule of law." Lopez Obrador said last Thursday he'll sign the changes into law even though he expects court challenges. Okay, well, I mean, guy kind of sounds like he's pushing some stuff. Many at Sunday's protests expressed hope that Mexico's Supreme Court would overturn some of the changes, as courts have done with other presidential initiatives. Well, we can hope, but you never know. If he is crooked, maybe he's in the right pockets. Let's hope not, though. Lorenzo Cordova, the head of the National Electoral Institute, has said the reforms seek to cut thousands of people who work every day to guarantee trustworthy elections, something that will, of course, pose a risk for future elections. Okay, well, if they're trying to cut people out, that usually means there's something funny going. Usually. The president strident pushed back against the judiciary as well as regulatory and oversight agencies, has raised fears among somewhat that he is seeking to reinstitute the practice of the old PRI, which bent the rules to retain Mexico's presidency for 70 years until its defeat in 2000 elections. Elections in Mexico are expensive by international standards, in part because almost all legal campaign finance is by law supplied by the government. Oh, wow. The Electoral Institute also issues the secure voter ID cards that are most commonly accepted from form of identification in Mexico. Imagine that, they have to have voter ID cards and oversee balloting in the remote and often dangerous corners of the country. Lopez Obrador remains highly popular in Mexico with an approval rating of around 60%. While he cannot run for re-election, his Monroe party is favored for next year's national elections, and the opposition is in disarray. Part of his popular appeal comes from railing against high-paid government bureaucrats, and he's been angered by the fact that some top electoral officials are paid more than the president. I'm not going to get into discussing their finances. That's, not here or there. I really hope that they're not trying to pull a fast one on the Mexican people and they're not messing with their vote. Only time will tell, and we'll see what happens. What do you guys think? Leave comments below. Let's have a discussion about this. Thanks for watching. Drop a like and a sub if you would. It would really help me out. And this is Chris from The Informed Stoner. Have a great afternoon.